I'm so glad that you all are here tonight. When I spoke at the gala last year, I had just begun my tenure as executive director of the Western Justice Center. It was barely weeks after the mass shooting at the synagogue in Squirrel Hill, Pennsylvania, and I felt a great sense of urgency. I joined the Western Justice Center because I believe that our unique use of the arts and the art of reconciliation help young people explore their common humanity and gain the skills to navigate conflict in a way that builds community. I believe that our work in conflict resolution education can play a revolutionary role in how we equip the next generation to become constructive leaders and participants in this ongoing experiment that we call American democracy. In these divided and divisive times, I believe our work is nothing short of critical. The only question is where to begin. In my years as a public interest attorney, I learned that the answer is always ask good questions of interesting people and listen to what they have to say. So after last year's gala, I embarked on a listening tour. I started by getting to know students from our Acting for Social Change class at the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts. Our program there empowers young people to use the arts to navigate conflict and find common ground. The students told me how the class had affected their plans for the future, whether they wanted to go to college, where they would go to college, what fields they wanted to study, and I heard how our program had given them the confidence to share their views and lift their voices. In January of this year, I attended a special Martin Luther King Day session of our Creating Bias-Free Classrooms program. I watched a diverse group of educators grapple with how to recognize and address bias, bullying, and identity-based conflict in their classrooms. They struggled with how to encourage free speech while also working to create safe, inclusive environments where children of all backgrounds could have an opportunity to grow emotionally and succeed academically. I was struck by how conscientiously they embraced questions about their own personal biases and how those biases might affect the way that they punished or rewarded behavior in their classroom. And I was grateful for the way our interactive curriculum created a non-judgmental learning laboratory for them to explore these difficult issues. In February, I participated in our Peer Mediation Invitational, which is hosted annually by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit in Pasadena. At the Peer Mediation Invitational, students practice their dispute resolution skills under the tutelage of judges, attorneys, and mediation mentors. While the students practiced their skills, I sat with the teachers, counselors, and other adults who run peer mediation programs throughout LA County, many of whom work in communities that face intense structural disadvantages and poverty. They felt that their students would be particularly well served by the confidence-building, skill-building benefits of peer mediation. But they also shared their frustration about how hard it was to break the crime and punishment mentality in their schools. In 2018, the Civil Rights Data Collection Project of the U.S. Department of Education once again reported that traditional school discipline has a disproportionate impact on students of color starting as early as kindergarten. Traditional school discipline includes citations for disruption and defiance in the classroom, suspension, and even expulsion. It is a critical step on the school-to-prison pipeline that peer mediation can disrupt through its power to keep kids in school rather than isolate them and push them out. And the teacher said, yes, that's exactly what we see happening. And guess what? The kids who get into the most trouble, the ones who start out as disputants in our peer mediation programs, they often become our best peer mediators. After all, they can connect with other kids in ways that we cannot. In June, I sat in on our ABCs of Conflict program. ABCs of Conflict is a 4-day intensive conflict resolution training program that covers a wide range of conflict resolution skills: peer mediation, intergroup relations, anti-bullying, and restorative justice. I listened to the wisdom from professionals from every level of our educational system. Teachers and counselors in their first few years in the classroom, seasoned veterans with decades of experience, principals and administrators in charge of child welfare and attendance for their entire school district. They all share the frustration that programs like peer mediation, with a proven track record of reducing suspensions and school violence while improving student social and emotional learning, were not supported more consistently. Peer mediation, they said, seemed to phase in and out depending on changes in funding or the latest trend for intervening in behavioral issues. Or they only survived at the whim of a particular principal or according to the dedication of an individual teacher. With everything that teachers already have on their plates, I was inspired by their desire to add conflict resolution into the mix. I was inspired by their dream of how conflict resolution education could become a mainstream component of how children are taught in our schools and how teachers are trained to instruct them. And I was touched by the distress that they expressed. If only we had had this training sooner, they said, we could have helped so many more students, especially high-risk students, like foster kids, homeless kids, and others struggling with the devastating impacts of poverty. And finally, over the summer, I met with leaders in government, the judiciary, philanthropy, the nonprofit sector, and academia. I learned about efforts to develop alternatives to juvenile incarceration, like court diversion and reentry services, and thought about the role that we could play at the Western Justice Center in deploying our more preventative strategies as part of that larger effort. I met with our partners at the Los Angeles County Commission on Human Relations and the Office of Education, who reported an alarming trend of increases in identity-based hate incidents and bullying on school campuses. I sat with principals seeking guidance from us on how to respond when students use Nazi symbols or images of lynchings, or berate their peers for their perceived immigration status, sexual orientation, or gender identity. I spoke with parents who are watching with dread at these two trends: criminalization of our youth and increased polarization of our society affect their children, their families, and their communities. And I met with judges, attorneys, professional arbitrators, and community mediators who impressed upon me the power of volunteerism and the ways it could help us expand the scope and scale of our work. After this year of listening, I feel an even greater sense of urgency. I feel compelled to ensure that the Western Justice Center will have a chance to grow and evolve. And I hope you do too. That's why your presence here tonight fills me with joy and gratitude. Together, we can reach more kids, more teachers, more parents, more schools, and more communities. Together, we can respond to the call of this moment. I'll share a bit of wisdom that was passed on to me by a dear friend. She is in her late 80s and has spent her life working for peace and justice. She says, if we are fortunate, we are filled with the desire to improve the world around us. Whenever we feel daunted by the size of that task, she says, we should ask ourselves two questions. What can we do? And what can we do? So as a variation on that theme, I leave you with this question. How would you like to be a part of the change that the Western Justice Center seeks to make in the world? Together, tonight, and the years ahead, I look forward to listening to your answer. Thank you for being here tonight.